If you're thinking about relocating to Greenville, then you've probably been following the channel for quite some time. Well, this video, we're gonna do something a little different. You've heard me talk all about Greenville over the last basically 2 years, and I thought it would be good for you to hear about Greenville through the eyes of one of the city's leaders. Today, we have Heath Dillard, who is going to be joining us in a podcast-style interview that we are going to basically have unedited for you to watch. In today's video, we talk about the status of Greenville today, tourism in Greenville, the relocation market in Greenville. We talk about the vision that Greenville has, and we talk about what Heath and his counterparts are doing to lead Greenville in that direction. It was a great conversation with Heath, so be sure to stick around for the entire video. And as always, my name is Will Sawyer, your friend in real estate. Enjoy. Heath, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate being here.
Just to start and kind of set a frame for you, this is going to go on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel over the last 2 years has attracted over 500,000 views, and we've had the pleasure of helping over 100 families with their relocations or at least purchases from the YouTube channel here in the Upstate of South Carolina.
That's amazing.
So we've never done a video like this, and super excited to have you in. So you should feel honored, and we are honored to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm your guinea pig. We'll see how it goes from here.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
So our audience is really one of two people, okay? The first being folks who are empty nesters or either retired or coming up on retirement, who live in an area that they don't have to live in anymore. And they've somehow found Greenville through publications, through news articles. You know, Greenville's out and about now, especially in the last 5 years. And they start doing research. They probably type into Google, moving to Greenville, South Carolina, or life in Greenville, South Carolina, something of that sort.
Yeah.
And come upon our channel and ultimately reach out to us to help them with their relocation. And those folks are seeking a better life, better quality of life, better weather, lower taxes, a state that is more freedom-based than the state that they live in now, I would say. And I'm sure you probably know all these statistics for folks that are relocating here. And then the other person that we mostly work with, or at least attract, would be folks who have families or who are having families, who see Greenville and the Upstate as, say, a nest in which they can build a life, build their family, and feel good about the place that their kids are being raised in.
Yeah, none of that's None of that's shocking. It sounds very familiar to what I hear almost every day.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
About who we're attracting.
So just to kind of tell you that up front, just to help you know who you're speaking to.
Yeah.
I figured that would be helpful. So Heath and I have never met before. I don't know a whole lot about you other than what I learned or gleaned in the 5 minutes prior to talking before we started recording. So tell us a little bit about who Heath Dillard is, where you're from, what your life looks like now, and what you do.
Well, very much like the people that you described who might find this YouTube video. However, I grew up in the Upstate. So I grew up in the neighboring county to the north in Spartanburg, in a very rural part of the eastern side of that county.
Pacolet, maybe?
Pacolet. You
really?
Found it. You know it. Yeah, you pinpointed it. That's the one. So really tiny community is on the eastern side of Spartanburg County. Cool. A lot of family that went to Clemson, and so diehard Clemson fan growing up.
You went to Clemson too?
I did not. So in my teenage rebellious years, I said, Clemson's a little too close to home. I'm going to go to the College of Charleston. So I went to
College of Knowledge.
Yeah, I joke. A place easier to get into and harder to get out of.
Sure.
But I made it out, and I lived in Charleston I lived there a year after I graduated, so I was there about 5 years, and left and moved to Charlotte, where I lived for 18 years, and worked in minor league baseball. I worked in hockey. I worked for 10 years there. My last 10 years working for the tourism organization in Charlotte, and so we managed the Charlotte Convention Center, the NASCAR Hall of Fame, 2 arenas, Performing Arts Theater, and we did all of the convention and meeting and sports sales and tourism destination marketing and ran the film commission for the city of Charlotte. And about 2.5 years ago, an opportunity came available to move back to the Upstate and to lead the VisitGreenvilleSC. And so when I found out there was an opportunity, I took that leap. It was an easy yes to be back home close to 2 grandparents and where they can come to school plays and baseball and football games and all that kind of stuff, and also just be part of a community that's growing and thriving and still all the things that you sort of described. It's got all the urban amenities that you really want and still is clean and safe and neighborly and welcoming and access to nature in really every direction. And so it was an easy yes. So I'm what they call boomerang, right? I was here, I left, and paid close. I've got a lot of friends and family throughout the Upstate. So I've paid close attention to Greenville, both personally and professionally over the last 20 years. Yeah. And very, very excited to have our family back here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
And you were saying you had a few kids and they're involved in extracurriculars, it sounds like.
They are. Yeah, they keep us quite busy. My wife is a 21-year South Carolina public school teacher. She's a Clemson grad herself. Nice. And teaches special education. Most of those years she spent working in middle school, and for the last this may be the 3rd season actually, she's worked in elementary. And so our kids get to go to school with her every day. We have 2 twins who are 8 years old and getting ready to wrap up 2nd grade, and we have a 12-year-old who's getting ready to wrap up 6th grade. And so between everything at school and everything extracurricular with sports and all that good stuff, they keep us on our toes.
Well, I can't believe you carved out the time to come talk to somebody you don't even know.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I mean, anything we can do to continue to help spread. I mean, it doesn't sound like we have to spread the word too much these days. People are finding us. A lot of what you described, our work is probably upstream of all that, right? By the time they've discovered Greenville, they've seen us on some kind of list, they've Googled us, they've probably encountered the work of our organization at Visit Greenville a lot of times without even knowing it. And so all of those lists and all those accolades is the work of our team, and I'm really proud of them. And we've been able over the last couple of years to help show this community the interconnectedness of a thriving tourism ecosystem with a high quality of life that can attract people, right? Both people who are of working age, so we can be a talent pipeline for the companies that want to move here. Yeah. But we also have the other end, right? The people who, even when I was in Charlotte, we were seeing the same trend there as we were attracting young professionals, but grandparents were coming with them. And I think Greenville's experiencing the same thing, the grandkids are the hook a lot of times. Yep. And Greenville is the magnet for the working age parents, which I think is a really beautiful thing.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So I was in a mastermind a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember the source of the data. I'm sure you might know these statistics at an intimate level. But the guy that was speaking said that 1 in every 2 people who moved to Greenville are over the age of 50.
Wow.
It could have been 1 in every 3, but I'm pretty sure he said 1 in every 2. And it's just a testament to what you just said. Right. And I don't know how accurate that is. I assume it's pretty accurate. The guy at least looked like he knows like what he was talking about.
That's half the battle.
But I mean, that makes sense to me, right? Because I'd say at least half of my clients are over the age of 50.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we're different than the coast, where Hilton Head and Myrtle Beach are attracting a slightly older demographic where it's primarily retirees. Yeah. I think South Carolina over the next 10 to 15 years is going to steal some of that retiree market share from Florida, whereas for a long time Florida has been a cost-effective retirement state. I think insurance premiums from weather catastrophes and condo HOAs and whatever else, right? There's a lot of things that are starting to offset the no income tax.
Yeah, and there's a record number of listings right now in Florida. Right. Over 15,000 active listings.
So there's some downward pressure on the equity side of the home too,
Yeah.
right? And so, so I think the next 10 to 15 years, South Carolina is going to be a beneficiary of that. And so I think the coast gets some of that. And I think where markets like Greenville and Spartanburg are going to thrive is that working age. You're seeing a lot of corporate investment in the community. Spartanburg County has really led the Upstate in industrial investment. So lots of logistics and transportation and industrial growth. Greenville, I think, is a little more landlocked. So they're going to attract more of the professional life sciences, sort of white collar, highly educated kind of engineering type of jobs. But it's attracting workers. And I think they're going to get both. I think they're going to get the workers and the families, but the grandparents are going to follow. And I think the data supports that, but I hear it anecdotally every single week. And I think where we tie in is most of those people come here because it started with a visit. And so they were here for a conference or a convention or a sporting event, or I've had people tell me they came here for a girls' weekend, and before they even left from their vacation to go home, they were contacting real estate agents about how do I move here. And I hear that story every single week, anecdotally. It's amazing.
I can't say that hasn't happened to me. Maybe not the girls' weekend thing, but I've certainly had a lot of people come into town and say, whoa, we love this. And they immediately start searching for a house. And, you know, some people are slower decision makers, more conscious about or more careful about the decision that they're making. So that takes 6 months to a year. But I was going to read you based off of what you just said. This is from the Greenville County budget document, fiscal years 2024 and 2025. Over the past 5 years, Greenville has attracted more than $1.67 billion in new business investments and 8,700 new jobs. This growth has allowed for more businesses to be created per capita than any other region in the southeastern United States.
It's amazing.
I was kind of shocked to read that. You know, I would think a place like Charlotte or Atlanta would, you know, just by virtue of its scale, and you would think it would still be leading in that per capita segment. But I was super, super impressed to hear that about Greenville and the Upstate's economy.
I think I think we're in the right place, and I think we're still an affordable place to invest. You know, I think Charlotte and Atlanta have a lot going for them. I mean, I lived in Charlotte for 18 years. I saw it kind of grow up around me a little bit. Exploded. Yeah, it really did. I mean, I lived inside the city proper, and the entire 18 years we lived there, and you know, you kind of don't. It's a little bit like the frog boiling, right? You don't feel it until you leave and have a chance to sort of look back over 18 years. And I just remember I'd come from Charleston, which was a heavy culinary and really local, unique restaurants. And when I showed up to Charlotte in 2005. That didn't exist there, right? We had chains, and we had a few chain steakhouses and things like that, but you wouldn't have thought of it as a culinary town. And where it is now and where it was a couple years ago when I left was vastly different. And you had all these chef-driven ideas and these chef-driven restaurants, and it's just a totally different market than it was when I moved there. And Greenville's in a different place. It's still affordable. It's growing fast, but it still has a very small town feel to it, and it's still vibrant but safe and clean, and people are friendly. And you know, if you need directions, they don't just tell you where to go. I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes. People are like, "Well, let me show you," and they walk, right? They don't just sort of point like, "Go down 3 blocks and hang a right." They walk, right? And so people leave with a different feeling than they do in a lot of other communities.
One of my most viewed videos on YouTube was early in the morning at 8 a.m. I looked like I just jumped out of bed. And one of the things I said is, if you're going to move to Greenville, just understand that people are nice. And I have seen that exact thing as well. I think it's kind of shocking for folks from, say, California or the Northeast to move here and to see people hold the door for other people, or to actually talk to someone on the street and be engaged in a conversation versus just going about their life and kind of saying, "Nah, don't talk to me." You know, it's kind of like two different worlds.
Yeah, it's very neighborly. You know, it's very welcoming and friendly community, and you know, you don't have to know someone's name or have ever seen them before to give them directions or hold the door or help them. You know.
And I guess, you know, people like us from Saluda and Pacolet, you know, we're kind of used to that.
Yeah.
Right. It's just kind of the way of life.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly the way of life. And you know, I've lived in small towns. I lived in Charleston. I've lived in Charlotte. I've been around a lot of people who talk about Southern hospitality. And I think that's generally true for the region. But I just feel like the people in Greenville take it to a different level.
Yeah. It's a great place to live. Welcome back.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you've lived in Charleston, you've lived in Charlotte, and now you live in the Upstate.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about comparing Charleston to Greenville in your eyes.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, I was in Charleston what feels like a
long time ago.
Yeah. You know, so the Charleston that I lived in is a different community. I mean, I was even down there and talking to my counterparts with Explore Charleston. And when I was there, I was working at a hotel while I was in college, and we literally wouldn't allow guests to go out of our front doors and go to the left. We're like, you do not go Upper King. You hang a right and you stay, you stay south or east or whatever it would be of Calhoun Street. And it's totally different. You know, I was just commenting that they've taken full advantage of the peninsula, right? Is when I was there and when I was in school, when I was working at that hotel, only half the peninsula was worth visiting. Everything else felt dangerous. And where I-26 terminated, we would have guests call us before they ever reached the front door thinking that they had made a mistake, because, you know, I-26 terminates, right? There's nowhere else to go. But there was 10, 12, 15 blocks between that and the front door of our hotel that were pretty seedy at the time. And we would have people calling saying, hey, I've got a reservation. I'm trying to get there. I clearly have made a mistake. And they're like, no, if you're on this street, just keep coming. You know, you should be passing this street and the next street, and you're getting close. And that's completely different now. And you know, Greenville wasn't all too different. When I grew up in Spartanburg County, as teenagers, if we said we were going to Greenville, we were going to Haywood Mall. We were not allowed to come downtown, right? You know, I joked that my dad would have said, you know, there's nothing downtown Greenville but drugs and prostitutes, right? And that would have been in the 90s, right? Before, you know, probably before the Peace Center and the redevelopment of the river and everything else. Certainly
and that was, sorry to interrupt. That was shortly after the textile industry left. Correct?
Yeah. You know, after years of it being gone, you know, but years of no investment back into the community yet. It was before the Liberty Bridge and before Falls Park, and maybe right around the time the Peace Center was being developed. And so it was a very different community. And so, you know, I'm coming into a community that a whole generation of leaders have been really bold and really creative, and they lived through the textile industry really leaving completely, like just leaving them high and dry, and having a decade or more where no investment was coming in, and unemployment was really through the roof, and quality of life was quite poor. And you had a group of leaders and families in the community who just said, we think Greenville is pretty special, and we think it's worth investing in. And it takes sort of 20 years to sort of see that vision come to life. But you have a 14,000 seat arena that you wouldn't build in your right mind for a community of its size 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just too big for the community that existed, but it's perfect for where we are today. It was, I think the stat is that we were the 14th highest grossing ticket sales arena in the entire United States in 2024.
I read that too.
And 25th in the world. And that's amazing, right? And so, but 25 years ago, the feasibility wouldn't have made sense to build that venue.
And you're talking about Bon Secours Wellness Arena.
Right. You know, so we have a AA hockey team, and outside of them, there's another 100+ events, from concerts to the SEC women's tournament. We'll host NCAA men's first and second round there next year. There's all kinds of events that we put in there that are really special. A-list celebrities who come through touring with their shows. And
it's about to get an upfit.
it's about to get an upfit. Yeah. So Beth Paul, the general manager of that venue, is my board chair and boss.
Awesome.
And so we partner with them on major events, and they're just an incredible team to work with. They outkick their coverage constantly on making sure this market gets high quality concerts and other acts. I mean, I've seen the Circus and Cirque du Soleil, and our symphony just played, the score of Star Wars and the other night. So they do all kinds of really kind of cool events over there. You got the Peace Center, which does all the high level Broadway shows come through there.
Most of my clients regularly attend the Peace Center.
Yeah, they're peacekeepers, I feel certain. And, we have great festivals. From Artisphere celebrated 20 years last year or so, and I don't know when this will air, but as we're recording it, it was over Mother's Day weekend, so 21 years of Artisphere. It's one of the top 3 or 4 ranked art festivals in the entire country by artists.
According to U.S. News or U.S. Today,
Right.
Whatever that publication is.
U.S. News and World Report, yeah.
It's another one, but
Yeah.
they named it the #1 art festival in the country. And we actually are, one of the YouTube videos that's going to come out right before the podcast, we interviewed the president of the board.
Yeah.
And she was talking a lot about Artisphere and the impact that it's had over the last couple decades.
Yeah. So we have a highly philanthropic community too. So
Yeah.
you've had decades now of a public government working closely with the private sector to build things that are really visionary for this market. And at the same time, you've had a philanthropic culture in this community that builds things like Artisphere and the Peace Center and, the Greenville Zoo and all kinds of other things. And it just establishes a quality of life that make it very special to live. In our world, our job is to drive tourism. And I say the things that make a place great to visit are very, very often the same things that make a place great to live. We're promoting the kind of amenities like the art and culture, all the local unique restaurants. You walk up and down Main Street, you do not see chain restaurants.
No.
You see locally owned, chef-driven restaurants. We have high-caliber sports, concerts. We have trails and parks. And, I think we're the only community in the state of South Carolina that within a 1-hour drive, you can be in 10 different state parks. You compound that with county parks and city parks and the trail networks. And so we weave the public urban amenities in with the nature and sort of peacefulness of the outdoors, as well as any community in the country.
So talk to us about tourism in Greenville.
Yeah.
I imagine it's got to be one of the biggest drivers. It's probably got to be definitely top 3 or 4.
Yeah,
I would think.
It's a very important part of our economy. We just celebrated National Travel and Tourism Week here a couple weeks ago and rolled out some 2024 studies. We're so much further ahead compared to most of the United States, sort of post-COVID. We saw $2.5 billion of impact from visitors in 2024.
Wow.
Nearly 56,000 people in our community work in the hospitality industry. So restaurants and hotels and art museums and arenas.
So that's 10% of Greenville's population.
It's a huge driver of our economy. And the beauty of it is that our community recycles those visitor-related taxes to invest in the things that we get to love as residents. So the taxes by visitors have helped pay for the debt service of the arena, for instance, or the taxes from visitors have helped create the Swamp Rabbit Trail, for instance, and many of our parks and things like that. And so the visitor economy is intertwined with the local quality of life very, very seamlessly. And those amenities that we promote are also enjoyed by locals. Our organization is responsible for bringing the SEC Women's Basketball Tournament. And over a 5-day period, it'll contribute nearly $20 million to our local economy. But something like 2/3 of the people who come to the arena are local or regional visitors, right? And are local or regional residents. And so it's, our ability to attract that event is due to our ability to attract visitors and their spending. but locals get to go see the top women's basketball in the country get played right in their backyard.
So talk to me about how Visit Greenville SC fits in that tourist economy.
Yeah, so we see ourselves as the leader. You know, we have nearly 100 hotels throughout Greenville County, 11,000 hotel rooms, hundreds and hundreds of restaurants. And our job is to how do we take the message of what makes them really special and what makes this area really special out to the world to help other people see it as well. And so we have a sales team that is responsible for bringing conferences and conventions and corporate meetings and sporting events to the city. So things like the NCAA Men's Regional that'll come here in 2026, the SEC Women's Basketball. We bring the Bassmaster Classic to town.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully here in a couple of years, we'll bring it back. We do hundreds and hundreds of events annually. And then we also do all of the leisure advertising. So we see something like 15,000 people a day show up to our website, VisitGreenvilleSC.com.
Whoa.
And those are people who are not only interested in visiting at some day in the future, some of them are local residents who are using our events calendar to figure out how to plan their weekend. Mm-hmm. You know, they're looking to us to figure out what's the festivals in town or what new restaurant just opened or, you know, whatever else is going on in the community. We have a lot of real estate agents who are members of our organization because they know a lot of the relocation happens because of a visit, and they want to be on the front end of that. So we see it very clearly that when somebody takes someone who's largely unexposed to Greenville and has never visited to the point where they see our advertising, to the point that they show up and visit, there's a 7 to 8x change in their perception of this place as a place to live, not just visit. And so great place to raise a family, great place to retire, great place to send kids to college, start a business, expand a business, relocate a business. All of these attributes that we as an organization never talk about see massive lift, even just with people experiencing our destination as a visitor.
And that was my next question is, you know, you attract people who have seen Greenville somewhere.
That's right.
Right? Whether it be a magazine or on TV or on the internet or possibly one of my YouTube videos just by chance, and don't know the first thing about Greenville. Me as a new resident, Visit Greenville SC was one of the resources that I used to figure out what was going on around town, figure out what Greenville had to offer because, you know, I lived in Spartanburg for 4 years.
Yeah.
And before that, I lived in the middle of South Carolina. I didn't know the first thing about Greenville. Right? Much less Spartanburg past the 4 years that I had lived here. So I needed something. So it's interesting that you mentioned local folks use it and folks who are interested in moving to the area. So my question is, how do you see people that visit Greenville? Do y'all track metrics, or what's that transition from a visitor to an actual resident?
Yeah, we for a long time sort of heard it anecdotally, and we knew that it existed. So I'd have somebody tell me, you know, they'd set up a coffee, they were new to town, they were trying to figure out how to connect to the community, they wanted to join local boards or volunteer or whatever. And it would be, hey, I came here for a girls' weekend. I'm from California. My sister's in Georgia. And, you know, when she was getting ready to go back to Georgia, I called my husband and was like, we're moving. And I'm going to extend my vacation for one more day. And I'm meeting with a real estate agent, and he or she's going to tour me around. And I would hear anecdotes like that constantly. And earlier this year, actually, we had a city council member ask us, they said, hey, we hear these anecdotes of people who have moved here that came here to visit and just fell in love with the place. Yeah. Do you guys have any data that actually backs it up? And so we had all this data to understand how our marketing influenced people's perception of this place as a place to do things that we don't talk about, right? We ask people to come for a visit or come for a conference or whatever, but we had data that suggested that there was this halo effect that existed for all these other attributes that I kind of mentioned earlier. But we had never sliced the data in a way that said, what about the people who've actually visited here versus just saw our advertising, for instance? And what we found was that was the secret sauce, is you could take a group of people who have never visited here before and have not seen Visit Greenville advertising. There's some familiarity with it, and most of that familiarity is positive. but there's an 8x change in perception for those attributes of place to move after they've seen our ad, booked a trip, had their trip, and had the experience in this market. And so we don't have the data to suggest it's X number of people and how much investment that is into the real estate community, but we can see the connection between what they thought of the place before showing up and what they think of the place after they've left.
I always say that, for the folks that come in for the first time, we usually have them do the Make Greenville Yours tour. I'm sure you've heard of that, and you probably know Mike, who does that tour. So they'll do the Make Greenville Yours tour. We'll meet at the office, and then they'll start driving into these communities that they might be interested in. And I always tell people that, my job is easy in the sense of I don't have to sell you on Greenville once you get here.
Right.
I've had maybe a handful of people say that Greenville's not for me, versus well over 100 people, hundreds of people in our sales pipeline saying that Greenville is for me at some point.
That's right. Yeah, and we see it in our own sales data as well. We have roughly a third conversion rate for all the conferences and conventions and things that we're pursuing. But the data doubles. It's 2/3 conversion if we find that we've actually gotten the prospect here for a site visit. And so, our sales team is externally deployed. They're all over the country. They're at trade shows in Vegas and Chicago and Florida and all over the place. And they can sit with all the great video and the background of imagery and all these kind of things. And they can talk about Greenville and they can say what makes it special. But we're twice as effective when we can get that group of meeting planners and conference planners here to see for themselves, right? To walk downtown. And I've had big clients that I've gone to dinner with our sales team, and we've been eating at Sobeys on a Tuesday night. Yeah. No major event in town. We leave dinner, it's 9:00 at night, and Main Street still has a lot of activity. A lot of people on the sidewalks, really diverse families, couples, business people, right? Like it's an interesting mix of who's on the street. And the prospect will say, "What's going on tonight? Why is it so busy? It's Tuesday night." And that's when the sale I know works, right? It's like, I'm like, nothing. Like, this is Tuesday night in Greenville in April.
People want to be downtown.
They want to be downtown. And he said, I live in the middle of Chicago, and Tuesday night's not this busy, like, in my neighborhood. And he said, this is amazing to see. And I know we've got them.
Yeah. So a lot of your sales meetings are big businesses? Is that who you're attracting here?
A lot of times they're big businesses. They're associations, so we have an association vertical where we're bringing in associations. There's association for everything. And so a lot of those are headquartered out of Washington, D.C. And so we work with those associations to bring all of those people here. We'll do conferences like SC Bio. We'll do their annual conference, and you'll have life sciences professionals from all over the world, a lot of them headquartered in Boston and other places, who will be in for 3 or 4 days. That was another great example. I mean, I was at that conference a year ago, and I was at dinner for the sponsors dinner, and I had 2 ladies next to me, both actually named Sarah, and one was the deputy director of health and human science for the White House. Her boss reported to President Biden. And another who was VP of development for major Alzheimer's drug. And neither had been to Greenville. They were here as keynote speakers for the conference. And so they had finished their duty and, independent of each other, had walked down Main Street, gone for a run on the Swamp Rabbit Trail, done some shopping, and done all the things. And they're like, oh my God, I had no idea what Greenville was. Yeah. And they were already planning to invite their friends. Yeah. And it just goes to show, how much the community sells itself. And I have people tell me all the time, you've got the easiest job in the world.
It seems like it.
I'm like, shh, don't say that so loud. Yeah.
Hopefully your boss doesn't see this video.
There are far worse places to have to promote tourism than our community, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I talked to a client last week who said that, so I always ask them if they visited before. Yeah. And then that kind of tells me where to take the conversation. And the gentleman that was speaking with his wife, he said that he had visited back in the 80s, I think, for business. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And he's like, it seemed like an awesome place, but it's just something that we want to check out again. Yeah. And the wife had never been here, and I was like, well, both of y'all essentially have not been to
That's
Greenville
correct.
because you're in for a treat.
That's right. Yeah. If we hosted the South Carolina Association executives a couple of years ago, and it had been maybe 8 to 10 years since that conference had been in Greenville. And I had many of them who had said, wow, this was really eye-opening. Like, I live in the state and I haven't been to Greenville in 5 years, and it's a completely different destination.
And it's a nice thing about my job because I get to sell real estate. I don't have to sell my area. I think Mike helps me with that. I think just in general, Max and the YouTube channel helps me with that.
Right.
And then, what I see a lot of is people who watch the videos and do research. I'm sure they visited your website and looked at all the resources. Once they actually come into town, most of the time they're like, sold.
Right.
And all right, this is when we're going to move.
That's amazing.
So it's good, man. It's really good. So talk to us about growth in Greenville. I'm sure that you're at the forefront of that, just as kind of the pinnacle beacon of tourism here in Greenville.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that there's a record number of people visiting Greenville.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a record number of people moving here. So talk to us about your thoughts on the growth that the city is experiencing and the county.
Yeah, we have had 3 consecutive years of record tourism coming out of COVID. So 2022, 3, and 4 have all surpassed the previous one. And so we're, what our team is trying to do, this sort of answers your question, I think, is we are growing really fast. And our team is trying to figure out how do we mitigate the growth and try to grow smartly. And so one of the things I was really proud of when the 2024 data came out a couple weeks ago was that we have increased the amount of visitor spending in our county by something like 33 or 34% since 2019, while only increasing the number of actual visitors by 5%. Okay. So some of the longtime residents, might feel frustration with the pace of growth that Greenville is on over the last several years.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we host these big events, for all their economic and financial impact that they make, and for all the small businesses that they support and jobs that they support, if you've been here a really long time and you're accustomed to knowing where all the secret hiding parking spots are, and you can always get in your favorite restaurant, that might not be true. And I can sympathize with why they might be frustrated.
And I'm sure you're in those meetings
Yep.
with officials and leaders.
Yeah.
What would their take be on growing not so rapidly, but
Right.
smartly at a good pace?
I think those of us in the economic development space would say we could stop all of our advertising, and yet people are still going to be moving here.
Yeah.
Cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
So, and if you have the choice of being in a community that's growing versus one that's in decline, and we've got several of those across the state of South Carolina, and you don't have to look very far to see what issues are on the other side of that coin, right? Is you would rather have our problems, right? How do we manage growth? I think what is important for the current group of community leaders, and I will humbly put myself in that group, is that we have to figure out who we want to be. I think there's a lot of people who know who they don't want to be.
Yeah.
And they look at certain challenges of Charlotte and Atlanta and other places.
Yep.
They recognize, Charleston can't grow to the east.
It's got 3 ways.
It's got 3 ways to grow. And it's grown so rapidly in those 3 ways that, other communities are experiencing this too, right? Places that are very busy from a tourism standpoint have outgrown the very people who serve that tourism community. And that's what we don't want, right?
Yeah.
Is you take a place like Palm Springs or maybe even Charleston. I don't know. I don't have the data, but like at some point you outprice the very people that you need serving those meals and cooking those meals and cleaning those hotel rooms and doing all the things to keep those hospitality businesses running. And we don't want to get into that standpoint. For most of the people who will probably watch this video, they'll look at our home prices and think that they're incredibly affordable. For people who've been here for 20 years, there's some sticker shock to those home prices.
Yeah.
And if you work downtown and you are a housekeeper, you can't live 2 or 3 miles outside of downtown anymore, right? You live further out. And so I think we look at things like road capacity and road
Yeah.
infrastructure and housing affordability, and we take them seriously. One of the things that our industry has done in the last few years is supported. We've supported the idea that you can use some share of tourism taxes as a way to invest in affordable housing. And so 15% of hotel accommodations taxes are now being deployed towards affordable housing initiatives.
That's great. I didn't know that.
And we're the only industry that's contributing to that crisis. And so I think you have people in our community who are, hypersensitive to issues of affordable housing and homelessness as they occur. We have a very clean and very safe area. We want to keep it that way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of people in the community who know who we don't want to be, but I think it's important to figure out who we do want to be. And
Who does Greenville want to be?
well, it's not for me to say, but I think we want to. I think it's really important to maintain the essence of what makes us very special. I think there are communities in the Southeast region, communities that I have loved and have visited. My wife and I would visit a lot pre-children that have grown so fast that they kind of become caricatures of themselves, right? Other people make money off what made them really special, and they lose that authenticity, right? They grow so fast and they get so big, and their communities get so bloated that what made them special and lovable 10, 15 years ago no longer feels authentic. And I think what's important to me is that 10 years from now, even as Greenville grows, and you can look up the exact stat, but it's something like 46 people net per day are moving to Greenville County.
Yeah.
And over the next 20 years or whatever it is, we'll grow by 200,000 or 300,000 people. That's going to happen whether we do our job the way we're doing it today or not. And so what is important to me is that 301,000 person feels that same friendliness and welcoming spirit that people who visit today do.
So what do you think the county and the city are doing to ensure that happens?
I think, we as a county, and I'll say all of the residents had an opportunity to pass a penny sales tax for road infrastructure in November of 2024, and we did not do it. So that puts a strain on local governments to find the resources, and resources are tight. You got money for schools. There's not as much money for roads, right? And so,
Which seems a bit ridiculous.
yeah. So it's tough, right? I mean, the folks who've been elected to govern, they have a tough road ahead. They've got to find the money some way because people are coming, and I think we're going to have to find ways to grow. I look around at the other counties, particularly on the coast. Their sales tax rate there is 2 or 3% higher than ours in Greenville County. And when you think about the interconnectedness of tourism, that means that tourism is subsidizing in very, very meaningful, significant ways the quality of life and the infrastructure investment that are happening in those counties.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, had we as a county, had we passed that penny sales tax, it would have raised $1.3 billion dedicated to roads, and visitors would have paid for 35% of it. And so our local residents would have been on the hook over an 8-year period for about 65 cents on the dollar for major road infrastructure, intersection changes. It was 1,300 shovel-ready projects. And I think we're going to have to come head to head with that very soon.
Which local residents complain about every day.
Right.
And you would just think that folks at bare minimum would want better roads, especially as more cars are driving down them, heavier cars are driving down them.
Correct.
With electric cars becoming more and more popular.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to have to come to that eventually as a community where, we're I believe our city and county are very lean. I don't think there's a lot of waste. That's not a political statement. It just, I work closely with those staffs and their leadership, and I think they're doing a good job. I think they're hardworking people who are passionate about the places that they live. But I think we got to be honest about what it costs to prepare for the kind of growth we've experienced and that we're going to experience in the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the investment. I mean, the number of homes that are being built and the people that are buying homes and the appreciation of those homes contribute to that investment. I mean, property taxes are going up as home values go up. And so, we need to find ways to recycle that money and invest in the community to make sure it's still a special place 10 years from now.
Yeah. And just to talk a little bit about home prices, the April data just came out yesterday, 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Median sales price is $314. Average sales price is $390,000. That's up 5.5% this year.
Wow.
Versus last year. But it's interesting because inventory increases double digits every single month.
Wow.
So it tells you how much demand is in our market. We're at just over 4 months of inventory. I mean, in
and I'm not in the real estate business, so normal market 6, kind of a rule of thumb.
Not normal, but balanced.
Okay, balanced, yeah.
5 to 6 months is
a balance.
Is what you want.
Right. So
and we've
better
been
than it was in 21, 22. But,
it was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad.
But better than then, but not quite balanced.
No. Yeah, but the thing is
but the prices are still moving.
One of the biggest brokerages technically in our market is D.R. Horton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they are building a ton of houses.
Yeah.
Meritage Homes is one of the bigger brokerages in our market as well, as far as home sales go.
They're building inventory.
Yep. And
has that slowed down at all with interest rates and tariffs and conversations around that, or there's still enough demand where it doesn't matter?
Not with my business, fortunately.
Yeah.
Like you said, people are going to move here regardless.
Well, my wife taught we lived in Charlotte. My wife taught across the state line in Fort Mill, which was another very fast growing community in the state. And it's a bedroom community of Charlotte. And I don't know if it still exists, but several years ago, they passed a development fee of $23,000 thinking that it would slow down demand. But when you're coming from one of these markets where where housing prices are twice as much as they are here, another $23,000, particularly if you're mortgaging it over 30 years, it doesn't slow people down at all. So they just factored it into the cost of the home. And it's
the developer. They're not going to pay that. They're just going to put it on the back end on the consumer.
Right? Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, so if you're selling a home, my neighbor is a retiree from Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
And, he worked a blue collar job, retired, moved to, a small lake community in South Carolina. That was his retirement plan. And what he sold, the home for in Buffalo and what he built the home for here, and what he got for, what kind of home he got here was amazing. And so adding $23,000 to the sticker price of somebody like that, it doesn't slow demand down at all.
No.
And
folks can build a custom house for $225 to $300 a square foot here.
Yeah.
And you got your hand select full of in-house design teams, architecture teams. Those types of custom home builders are going to be $400, $500, $600 a square foot.
Right.
But if anybody picks out a floor plan, picks out a plot of land that they want to build on, you can very easily build that for $200 to $250 a square foot. And there's a lot of land to build on here.
Yeah.
You might be 30, 40 minutes outside of the city, but you can find half an acre to 5, 10, 15, 100 acres.
What you want. Yeah.
Right. And, people from out of state look at that and they're like, you have this city and you have these prices. Why would I not move here?
That's right.
So, plus there's better weather, right? You don't have to bear the barren winters of Buffalo, New York anymore.
Right. Nope.
Or Chicago, you know. So, it just goes back to our jobs aren't that hard.
No.
Because we're not really selling Greenville, we're just exposing it,
That's exactly right.
So, we've talked about growth of Greenville. Are you concerned at all with the growth of Greenville?
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned if we don't get our arms around and manage it. I mean, I'm not concerned with the numbers, but I'm concerned if we, as a community, don't address the challenges. I don't know that there's a silver bullet for housing affordability. I mean, I think if there was, more communities would have figured it out. So I think it's complex. The cost to build multifamily and all of that, it can be tough. And what's affordable to one person is maybe not affordable to another. And so what does that even mean? And so I think my biggest concern would be sprawl and road infrastructure. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we've got to tackle. I also, am always concerned about the downstream effects of the economy. So if we're attracting, working age adults, are we, do we have places that are affordable for school teachers, right? I'm sensitive to that since I'm married to one. Sure. Can we attract the nurses and the doctors and the school teachers and the policemen and the firemen? Is that with all of these other people working in these other jobs, there's these secondary needs that exist in an economy, and we've got to make sure that we're building a community for everybody and not just those who are coming from higher priced places who can afford to pay cash, cash for a home.
Yeah.
So I would say, if anything, it's the kind of growth and just making sure that we're thoughtful about an entire community of people and not just a subset.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. It seems to me, at least through what I read and what I listen to, that the city leaders and the county leaders of Greenville are doing all that they can to control the pace and to make sure that we are growing in a smart way. We were driving through Charlotte to go to West Virginia about 2 or 3 weeks ago, back to my wife's family's house. And we got on 77 and started going up 77 towards Mooresville. And every off-ramp coming off the interstate was backed up full of traffic. I mean, every single one for 10 miles.
Right.
And I just was thinking, how can people live here? Maybe exit 30, Standing Springs Road in Greenville might be that, for 30 minutes.
Right.
Every day at rush hour. But do we have the infrastructure I don't think we do, certainly right now, to handle 200 to 300,000 more people, like you said.
Yeah, we've got to find that. To me, that's the biggest thing that we've got to solve for. Yeah, is road infrastructure.
So I'm sure that as the person at the helm of Visit Greenville SC, you're comparing our city to other similar markets, and those would be, I'm sure, Charleston, Savannah, maybe the suburbs of Atlanta, I would think, maybe Asheville, Eastern Tennessee.
Correct.
Talk to us about comparing our city to some of those markets.
Yeah, we pay close attention to all of those southeastern communities: Chattanooga, Knoxville, Atlanta, Charlotte, Columbia, Charleston, Savannah, all of them. Some of them as tourism destinations have a much longer road that they've been doing this than we have. Greenville has probably been truly our organization is a little over 40 years, but I would say we've been truly in the tourism game for a little over a decade, maybe 15 years, legitimately doing leisure marketing and advertising. And so you've got the Charlestons and Hilton Heads and Myrtle Beaches of the world that are on a they're decades into this already, right? But I do think what we're finding, and COVID kind of exacerbated this a bit, is like we were already seeing this in 2017 and 18 and 19, is this sort of basically this confluence of tourism amenities being really attractive for places to live and for people to move. And COVID exacerbated it. When people could live and work kind of anywhere, it became even more so. It was like, man, I want to live in a community first, and I'll figure the job thing out. If my employer allows me to work remote, great. If not, I'll find a job in that community. Yeah. And I think the Sun Belt, right? The Southeast states are experiencing that influx of migration. And so we find ourselves sort of enjoying that as a whole. And so how do we distinguish Greenville from these other places? And right. I think, we don't have a beach. We do have mountains, but Asheville and Knoxville and Chattanooga and those have mountains too. And so our people continue to make this a really special place. And industry, right? your stat earlier was interesting. I think another really interesting stat is Greenville has more foreign-owned, or I guess it has more people working for foreign-owned companies per capita than any place in the United States. So the foreign direct investment that has flooded the upstate over the last several decades, and it's the Michelins and BMWs, but their suppliers as well, is we've got,
Sure.
Lots, TD Bank is Toronto-based bank, right? And so you've got all of these international companies that have come here, and you kind of experience that in our downtown. I mean, who would have thought Greenville, South Carolina would have an Afghan restaurant or a Georgian restaurant or
Jamaican.
I mean, you've got these international flavors all over, and so I think that makes our economy a little bit different than some of those other places that are maybe more on the leisure and more heavy on the hospitality side. We have a diversity of industry that maybe makes us a little more different.
Yeah. Yeah, we were in Savannah for our anniversary, I guess the second weekend of April. I don't know how many days that was ago. But it seemed like, a lot of the people that we saw walking around were bachelorette parties.
Right, yeah.
And I'm sure that segment of tourism has really changed the game for Savannah.
Right.
Whereas development, planned development,
Right.
smart development, which is what I feel like Greenville's focused on, especially with Unity Park. And that's been kind of their big leader over the last 2 or 3 years, with Falls Park when it was installed, the Grand Bohemian Lodge. And then if you percolate out into the county, Lawrence Road's about to, it's going to look different in 20 years.
Correct.
Augusta Road's going to look different as well.
Yeah.
So I think you're starting to see these projects pop up that is doing away with the old rundown commercial districts and making it very cohesive, and making it a good place not only to drive through and from to go to work,
live and work,
but
and
to
eat.
actually live,
Right.
to go to dinner after
Right.
work. So I think there's so much emphasis put on Greenville City. Now we're starting to see smart development move out into the county, which is a lot of where the growth is happening. So it's really encouraging to see.
Well, and for as much love as we give downtown Greenville, we've got really cool downtowns all over Greenville County. I mean, downtown Greer is beautiful.
Yeah.
With what they've done there on Trade Street. Downtown TR, you got Simpsonville and Fountain Inn, and you've got Bridgeway Station happening out in Malden, the building of the minor league soccer stadium out there, and what they're doing. So you're having these enclaves that allow you to live and the city of Greenville's there and downtown Greenville's there, for when you want it, but you don't have to get there every day, right? You're starting to see these nodes pop up all over Greenville County where you can live and work and play and get into a downtown that maybe isn't downtown Greenville, but it still has a lot of really cool, unique restaurants.
And that's what you see in places like Charlotte. There's Noda.
Yeah.
There's
Plaza Midwood, all of them, right? In the South End.
So now you're starting to see that pop up around Greenville, and it's a testament to the growth. It's a testament to the county actually putting an emphasis on making these places a little bit more livable, a little bit more cohesive for people to actually gather, not necessarily to drive to work and go home.
Yeah, and that'll help, right? I mean, we don't want everybody to live in the suburbs and commute into the center city, right? You want there to be nodes that take up some of that congestion, traffic, and population.
And we have to mention Spartanburg.
Yeah,
I mean, there's hundreds of millions of dollars being pumped into downtown Spartanburg right now with Project Core. So it's a good time to live in Spartanburg too.
Yeah, I'm excited for Spartanburg. I'm glad to see the investment in downtown. I think places like Charlotte and Greenville are a testament to why a strong downtown core is so important for the livelihood of the entire county. Starting
in the city and then going out.
Yeah, and so I'm glad to see so much of Spartanburg's growth, over the last several decades has been industrial. So it's been, it's been along I-85 and the other sort of major transportation corridors. But it's great to see the investment in downtown and what that's going to mean for that community.
Yeah. And when I lived there from 2014 to 2018, there were certainly parts of downtown Spartanburg that you didn't go.
Right.
That's changing a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't go there often, I've sold several houses there. I only really go there when I'm showing houses or meeting with a client. But I mean, you just drive through Spartanburg and there's actually buildings going vertically.
Cranes and things, right? Yeah.
It's great to see because Spartanburg's always been kind of the, what would you say, like the redheaded sibling of Greenville?
There definitely is a sibling rivalry between the two communities.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of growth happening in the middle. And
Sure.
Spartanburg's such a big county along the interstates, right? You got so much mileage on 85. You know, if you think about Spartanburg County going all the way from, I don't know, roughly exit 56 to somewhere around 90, right? That's a lot of interstate. And then in the opposite direction, it's the same way from Landrum to Lawrence on 26, right? It's a huge county.
Yeah.
Whereas Greenville's, you know, built up and north and into the mountains a little bit more. So, yeah, they're different, but there's always been this little sibling rivalry.
Yeah. It's got a great healthcare system.
Yeah.
As does Greenville, with two of the state's leaders, or three of the state's leaders in the region, Prisma, Bon Secours, and Spartanburg Regional. So I think that's really helpful. They have a level 1 trauma center in Spartanburg Regional. So, you know, that's a check off the list there.
Right.
All my clients ask me about that, you know, if they're looking at Spartanburg County. And like you said, that section between Greenville and Spartanburg, the Greer, the Bowling Springs, the Duncan, the Reedville, now Woodruff.
Yeah.
With the announcement of the battery plant being built.
It came out today that Woodruff is the number one, or maybe it's the number one growing town in the entire state of South Carolina.
I'm not surprised.
It's definitely number one in the Upstate. It may be number 2 overall, but it's definitely number 1 in the Upstate.
So, as the man to know, with let's just say visiting Greenville, no pun intended. What would you say to the audience that is thinking about coming to Greenville for a weekend? What would you say they have to do?
I think I think downtown is our crown jewel. I mean, I hope that they would explore more than that, but you have to have that on your bucket list. If they're into active outdoor, you know, get on our trails and either ride bikes. We have great e-bike rentals, so if you don't want to work hard and you want to ride an e-bike up the Swamp Rabbit Trail, you can do that. And just enjoy downtown and the amenities. We've got great places to eat. You know, you can catch a show at the Peace Center or Bon Secours Wellness Arena, but find yourself out in the outdoors. You know, experience how close you really can kind of get away, but you don't have to go very far to do that, right?
Yeah.
You can be in a state park where you know you're at waterfalls and lakes and creeks and trails and not very tough hikes either, right? You know, just to get a chance to get out of it. You can be there in minutes. And so just to see that proximity, I think that the duality of our ability to do that and to deliver both of those makes us pretty special.
Conisty Nature Preserve.
Yeah.
It's just south of the city.
Yeah. We were just there for an event last night where, you know, they suffered some damage, as did our state parks, due to Hurricane Helene. So a lot of work still to be done, but great to see them getting the investment that they need to make those repairs.
Yeah.
And so it's right outside of town, and easy way to explore nature. And you know, how many communities can you be in where just a few minutes down the road you're, you know, in the middle of nowhere, right? Just enjoying nature. And
you've kind of touched on it earlier in the conversation, but you know, if you look out 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, when we're both old men, what do you want to see Greenville be? I expect this to be a more professional services sort of community. I expect Greenville's evolution to, you know, we were a textile community. Coming out of textiles, we were manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. And I think that's going to move into more of the finance and real estate and insurance and life sciences and those kind of services. I hope, you know, we will be a community that decides to invest in its future, our children. So I hope we continue to have a great education system. I hope we continue to invest in that. We also have a strong
conservation group here. And so, despite all of Greenville's growth, one of the things that I think has held true is a dedicated group in our community that protect land to make sure that future generations can enjoy it. And so we're seeing more and more evidence of long-term landowners putting those into trusts and donating those to the Conservancy and either creating state parks or adjacent to state park kind of land. Yeah. And so I hope, despite the population growth that we experience over the next 20 years, I hope that we maintain access to the outdoors, because I don't think Greenville is where it is today without that investment, without leveraging a river that quite literally runs through the middle of downtown. To hear our mayor talk about, 20 years ago, we had a highway that ran over the falls, and most people who lived here had never seen our falls. Yeah. It's hard to move here now and to think about that and to believe that is true. But when you see the pictures, you quite literally go, yeah, how would you have seen the falls the way this bridge was constructed? So to have torn down a thoroughfare and put up a pedestrian bridge so that people can enjoy nature just steps off of Main Street is quite incredible. And so I hope 20 years from now we have grown in a way that we're still reminded of that Greenville is this duality of like modern urban with the cleanliness and the safety and the friendliness, but with access to nature.
Yeah, I've always heard that because I worked at Sobeys when I first moved to Greenville, as I was starting my career, and I've always heard that taking Main Street from 4 lanes to 2,
yeah,
and putting parking on the side of the streets on those exterior lanes, Carl bringing Sobeys into downtown was kind of the catalyst for everything that started to come downtown. And it seems like the Liberty Bridge spanning over the falls was a small step in this kind of leap that Greenville has made.
Right.
And, I just thank our city leaders and our county leaders for doing what they've done, and certainly thank you as well for what you do.
Well, thank you. I hope to someday be that old man that you described and be able to look back and to be able to see fingerprints on what has been positive changes. I've had the pleasure to meet a lot of those visionaries from a generation ago, who were sitting here in the middle of a community that had seen its industry leave and wondered about what its future held, but were brave enough and bold enough to imagine a better future and to have the courage to invest in it. And so I hope I'm sitting here 20, 30 years from now looking back like they are today and being proud of having that courage and having the will to build what we've been able to build so far.
Well, we appreciate Visit Greenville SC. We thank you for all the resources that you give me and the folks that we help move to our area and local folks who already live here.
Well, I'm sure a lot of them have already been, but if they haven't, you feel free to utilize VisitGreenvilleSC.com to find your way around our community, or, figure out what festivals in town when you're here looking for real estate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you. Thank you for watching the podcast with Heath Dillard, the CEO of VisitGreenvilleSC.com. If you are thinking about relocating to our area, he has a great website that he mentioned towards the end of the podcast that you should definitely be using as a resource for discovering and learning about Greenville. And if you are thinking about relocating to our area, please do me a favor, shoot me an email at my email below. Shoot me a text at my cell phone number below. I would love to help you with your relocation to our area in the coming months. As always, my name is Will Sawyer, your friend in real estate here in the Upstate of South Carolina. And until next time, stay safe. Well, this video is going to be about Greenville County, the Upstate of South Carolina. Great thing to do and easily in the evening. I'm a local real estate expert here in the area. All the time, we're right behind me is a really cool place called Freight Yard.